Hi, Dan.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Sure can. And my sound's okay?
Audio's not working, Carden.
Okay. How's that? No audio? Can't hear?
I can't hear you. No. It's not muted.
No, I know. I'm gonna dial back in.
Okay.
Hi Danielle, it's Kerry. I got an invite from Christina. I could hear you both clearly. Can you hear me? No.
Can you hear me now, Dan? No?
Carden, it's Nicole. I can hear you.
Oh. Hi, Nicole.
This is the joy of technology.
And Danielle, I can hear you too.
Maybe if you dial, like we can leave your face, but dial in on your mobile for the audio part of it.
Dan, Nicole can hear me.
I can't hear you.
I know.
Danielle, can you hear me?
So use your phone. Are you on your phone? Use your phone and just dial into the audio. No, you can't. Okay.
It's not me, it's you. Nicole, can you let her know?
Maybe I'll run solo then.
No.
It's nice to see people joining.
I don't think Danielle can hear me either, but Michaela says that she can hear everyone.
I can hear everyone as well.
This is Bronwyn. I can hear everyone too.
Okay, this is very strange. Sorry, you can all hear me typing because I'm trying to communicate to Dan.
So Michael can hear everybody, but it's only me that can't hear Carden. Right. Let me try headphones then.
Such a strange situation, but thank you everybody for bearing with us.
Right,
Welcome to the
all fixed.
Dan, welcome.
Thanks, Carden.
Welcome to the weird world of tech fails. You know, for the first, I swear it was the first 2 months, we had no issues whatsoever. We went straight to Zoom, everything worked really well. And then we had one meeting, which was supposedly a pitch where we used Skype at the potential client's request, and it fell out 4 times in 45 minutes. And Dan and Holly and I found ourselves going, why did the first tech fail have to be a pitch? But my passive aggressive response to Skype now is to tell everybody that that's what happened, because we'd had no issues at all on Zoom. So thank you all for joining us today. Thanks especially to Dan, who, for any of you who know Dan, Dan is one of the most, she's probably the most competent marketer I've ever met. She's quite technically extraordinarily good, and it's partly because she's got an engineering degree, partly because she's worked in asset management for a million years and is both big picture and detail oriented. One of the other things about Danielle is that she really hates presenting. So Dan's sitting here feeling like she'd probably rather chew glass and swallow than present to anybody. So my job today is primarily to help Dan feel more comfortable so that you will get out of this what we promised. Dan's done quite a bit of research on what is working right now and engaging virtual events. She's looked offshore, she's looked at examples outside the financial services sector, and she did that for our clients. And she's got a downloadable guide on that she's put together, which has got a lot of what we're going to talk about today. But obviously what's most valuable about a conversation like this is you and us together, and you being able to engage and ask questions and get involved. So the written document is the written document. That's there for you to have a look at as and when you want to. But what I would encourage you, and I'll give you a little bit of warning because we didn't tell you this up front, is I would encourage you to tell us what you're struggling with, what you find working, and what you'd like more of. So we're going to keep this super fast and snappy. We're going to invite you into the conversation, and we're going to deliver on our promise of telling you what is working. We're going to give you some creative ideas. We're going to tell you what the emerging best practices are. When I say we, I really mean Danielle. And we're going to tell you how to connect better with people. I've got one example from an offshore global entrepreneurial coaching organisation who I think do this well, but Dan has done more research. And so my example is kind of more the, you know, a how-to and a specific one. So getting right into it. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Carden. BlueChip is the firm I started 16 years ago. This is Danielle in the pink. Danielle is a former client. She ran Hyperion's marketing for a long time. She's a fantastic marketer, a good friend and BlueChip CEO. This is the second session we've run in our Upskilling Your Online Presentation Skills. Some of you might have attended Kai Chow's webinar presentation, or you might have seen my very lo-fi videos on LinkedIn practicing those skills and showing how not to do some of it. You can get his cheat sheet or look at the 10 mini videos there. And we also wrote an article on pivoting to webinars at the beginning of COVID-19 and lockdown, which might still be relevant to you. So we can, when we email you afterwards, we'll link to those resources, but they're all on our website under the news section under COVID-19 response resources. So most of you are doing webinars and you're doing them well. And what I've heard from a lot of you is you're getting really good attendance. I know some of the super funds have had great numbers turning up. And so this is not designed to be a one-on-one. It's really designed to address some of the real challenges we're all facing now in turning your in-person events or your conferences or your roundtables and seminars into virtual and taking it to another level, given that we don't know how long we're going to be in this environment for, but we know that the forward plan for any in-person events is very uncertain. So Dan's put a framework together. Little housekeeping, as you know, mute yourself, stay on mute. Background noise can be very distracting. I can't control mine entirely, so I apologise in advance if the lorikeets come to visit. Doorbells, kids crying, etc. Dogs barking, tic-tac. If Danielle's doorbell goes, tic-tac will go as well, just letting you know. Feel free to turn on your webcam. You know, we've both got makeup on because here we are presenting, but, you know, we don't expect you to. And we'd love to see your faces. That's actually helps our ISO anxiety. We'd like it to be as in person as possible. And if you've got any questions, drop them in the chat, but we'll actually come back and call you in as well. So Danielle, over to you.
Thanks, Carden. So off to a great start. I've got a new laptop, so apologies for not figuring out the audio on that. But what I'd like to do today is really go through how to make it engaging. As Carden mentioned, most people are pretty comfortable in this Zoom, death by Zoom environment. But a lot of financial services marketing calendars involve the longer format roundtables and conferences. And part of those is everybody in a room, which is clearly not something a lot of us are comfortable doing just yet. And also the government doesn't particularly want us to do that, particularly if you're in Victoria. So trying to look at what is sort of ideas to be able to still be able to make your sales and business goals while we're all still largely at home. So we're looking at sort of creative ideas, some engagement in ideas. We're not actually going to be necessarily living or walking that talk in this. This is a bit more of a straightforward environment. And part of that comes down to platform selection, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And yes, and some examples from what we've seen offshore to hopefully spark some creative juices for your own program. So I thought I'd talk about it in sort of three main buckets. It's preparing for the event, then during your event, and post the event, which is a very innovative structure. First of all, what we're seeing is that the virtual events actually take a slightly different skill set, which I've just demonstrated. So you'll need to think through your team and their responsibilities really carefully. Most people will often have physical event experience, but the technology adds a whole nother dimension, and having your speakers not physically with you potentially adds a whole nother level of complexity to the organisation of your event. So I was listening to Forrester talking about they've pivoted their American event and also now their Asian event. And and the head of organising that said they spent probably a disproportionate amount of time with the team understanding responsibilities and workflows to ensure that that was really buttoned down, and also leaving the sort of tech component last, if you like. So there were plenty of partners, and again, we'll talk about who's offering those tech platforms, but thinking about your team probably a bit differently, and as I say, being really clear on who's doing what is going to be key. The attendee journey needs probably rethinking as well. We're very familiar with turning up, you register, you go to the keynote speaker, there'll be some breakout sessions. So how do we bring that online? And it is possible to do that. Clearly, the presenters, that component of planning for your event is the same. It's the quality and the interest and the topics that you choose and the quality of speakers that you invite that are going to get your audience there. There's doesn't matter how whiz bang the tech is and how engaging perhaps within the conference it's going to be. It really comes down to the content and the presenters. Presenters can sort of turn up in multiple different ways. They can pre-record and then perhaps be available live on the day, though the live experience is probably going to increase the engagement and just be a little bit more interesting. But as we allow people in a room together now, it's no longer March, look at potentially having a studio set up and having your speakers or a panel or whatnot physically in the same room with social distancing, so that you still get that interpersonal connection happening while we're still being virtual. And be
so
really
Dan,
clear.
can I just pause for a minute? You said have them in the same room. Who have you seen doing that, and how do you think it worked?
So Octopus, the funds manager, is a really interesting example. They've been doing this for a while. They have a thing, Octopus TV, which they run through a YouTube channel, and they do multiple formats of that. So they have more like a TV cross, if you like, so very much like the ABC, perhaps two presenters sitting at a panel. They have coffee chats, which is probably a bit more like, oh gosh, I'm blanking, I'm thinking of Good Morning America, that sort of format where you're sitting around a sofa talking, and then just conversations between presenters and whatnot. So multiple formats with people in a studio typically, so it's a little bit, is quite a professional setup. The
Cool,
advantage
thanks. And what about a non-financial services example?
I've mostly looked at financial services. Salesforce, they pivoted their whole Sydney. They were due, I think, in April to run their annual world tour. They do massive conferences. I think the one in San Francisco, I think it gets like 100,000 people. So it's a really giant event. They pivoted their Sydney into a virtual event and did similar sort of things. And they actually had a 23% increase in people showing up and
Wow.
views. And I think Atlassian was the same. So certainly the tech industry are all over this and doing a great job.
Well, that would be consistent with some of the super fund experiences too, because I know what a lot of you are saying, or what some of you are saying, is you're getting far more attendees to the webinars than you would have at regional seminars or to your normal roadshow programs or your other in-person events.
Yes.
And that's a pretty big upside.
Being able to reach those regional audiences, which get forgotten often or maybe get seen once a year, is a giant advantage.
Yep. Dan, just so you know, I've also warned everybody that in about 5 minutes, I'm going to ask for some volunteers to give us some of their challenges and some of their success stories.
Yes, I would love to hear what's going on.
But I'll let you get back to where you were.
Gamification. So it's death by screens, obviously, at the moment. So planning through your event, as Carden just did, I guess, interrupting my monologue and having participation from the audience, but also running, I call it gamification, where people are perhaps on a public leaderboard, how many comments they made or participated in the event or likes they did on social, whatever it is, and a leaderboard, and then maybe at the end of the day, the person with the most engagement wins.
Which is like the Twitter leaderboard at industry conferences.
Exactly.
Which effectively happens at Aspen now already. But when you think about what you and I saw in HubSpot in Boston, whenever it was, 4 or 5 years ago, when we nearly exploded with excitement.
Yes.
And there were people like Brené Brown keynoted.
Yes.
Oh my God. And David Mims got opened and Seth Godin opened. But to get into the top of that Twitter stream was like a massive in-person, like in-event kudos thing. It was huge because there were, how many people there? 12,000?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So to be a trending tweeter at that is huge.
Yes.
So what are the mechanics? Like if you're, say, so based on what you've seen, how would you gamify it for, well, we've got all the usual annual conferences coming up, maybe not. But if you think about it from a fund manager point of view, doing some of the work that you do with fund managers, like running webinars that are part of an education process, or a super fund running member webinars, or say, ASFA, FSC, FPA, the varying sizes of events from maybe, 60 to 3,000. How would that work in this environment?
It's much the same as it would work, as we've increasingly seen in offline events. So the conference software platform, whether that's BrightTalk or On24 or even Zoom, depending on the complexity of the delivery, that's one aspect of the tech stack, if you like, in this. And then the other part of that is other, whether it's through Twitter or there's the polling software. Sometimes the polling software is incorporated in the conferencing software, but there's also ones that you can use outside of that. To use those, and I think the leaderboard is really, it's everybody's, well, it tends to bring out the competitiveness in people, and it keeps people's attention, and some of them get very motivated to win the iPad or the new, it tends to be an Apple product, I have to admit.
So there's a product as well, which is kind of that's a big thing, right?
Yeah. Which then brings me to swag. When you turn up to the conference, there's the pen and there's the USB stick and there's the tote bag or whatever that is. That still can happen. I think that's still something that we should be considering in the mix as well. There is issues around how do we deliver that to people, and not everybody's going to want to give you, the event organizer specifically, their home address per se, but there are fulfillment. They might be more comfortable giving that to a fulfillment or distribution house to send you the mug or whatnot. And of course then there's gift certificates or online certificates, and Carden, you and I have done that with virtual drinks, where we've sent people Dan Murphy's gift cards to go and get a bottle of something that we open together and enjoy.
We need to diversify our swag category. I think alcohol and food is probably not as creative as we could be.
No, but you could do something fun with that. So if you're doing a virtual drinks, it would be nice to receive, I don't know what it is, maybe it's like a little mixer kit. So you can be quite innovative that. And I've seen, what do you call those organisations that put logos and whatnot on them, sending
promotional products,
hand sanitizer kits, and like that's opened up a whole another area for sending out gifts. So that's still something to consider. The next thing I was going to talk to is just the sort of networking and virtual space. In any conference I've been involved in, what people really enjoy about the conference, apart from hearing great content and great speakers, is the meeting the other people. It's the networking, it's the things that happen over lunch and in the coffee breaks and whatnot. That's really hard to do, clearly, when we're all sitting individually, but not impossible. One thought I had was, and have seen, is running much smaller, and maybe this is where your experience comes in too, where you run much smaller little breakout sessions. So even if and it has to be a little bit more designed, and contrived is the wrong word, but a little bit more intentional than just bumping somebody at the coffee urn. So arranging almost little groups of 2, 3, 4 people in a speed dating type setup almost, where they get put together into a virtual room. They're in there for 5 or 6 minutes where they get to have a chance, and then they move on. I would recommend a facilitator in there, because it is quite artificial and it is quite a little bit awkward. We're not really totally digital animals just yet. So you do need to, as the event organizer, probably work that a bit harder. And it could be a really opportunity for a sales team member to be in there with facilitating those conversations. And particularly if it's meant to be more a light, it's a content-free zone, essentially. It's more just to get to know people. So it's a bit forced. I think we've all been on the virtual drinks, and it just feels a bit odd. So you want somebody who's good at being that social lubricant. Was that how you experienced at Strategic Coach?
Yeah, so what they did, I was on a panel session for them yesterday with potential new clients. There were about 40 people easily on that session, but the previous thing I'd done was a 2-hour workshop with them. And their format, as you know, is normally 2 days offshore. And of course, they can't do that anymore. So what they've done instead, which is typical of what I know we've done and a lot of our clients have done, is they've cut down the format because it's virtual, so it's much shorter. But one of the things they've done to translate it is they're on Teams as a platform, but they have their teaching tools. So it's very much educational content and discussion. And the way that they teach, they'll teach a tool. They will have everybody, which I think is useful to do for here as well. You'll see that I've actually changed my name. I'm now Financial Services PR and Marketing Carden Calder. And the reason I've done that is that on yesterday's call, they said, everybody put your industry. And so that's my industry. My weird industry is the intersection of two things, but organisation name or not job title maybe so much, although maybe depending on the format you're in, but that's not a bad way to ask people in the meeting to do it. And so if you go, like, it's different on every platform, but on the platform that I'm doing this on, I'm on iPad. And so the 3 dots, which say more on the right-hand side, somewhere in there, it says rename, I think if you're on a laptop. And then somewhere, which I can't work out, you can actually change your own details. So actually, if I go to participants, I click on myself, I can rename myself. So that's not a bad way. So I might actually ask everybody to do that, because I did warn you that this was a participation webinar. And if you're doing something else, that's okay. We won't judge you, but we'll know who's listening simply by, oh, Christine Cummings, thank you very much. That is cool. You're all much better at this than I was yesterday. Thank you, Philippa. Yeah, so yesterday I was the dumb person on chat who wrote to everybody and went, it doesn't work on iPad. And I was like, oh, shit, it actually does work on iPad. I just couldn't find the right button. So well done to those of you who've managed to find that a lot faster than I did. Well done, Lucy. Nice work. Philippa, good work. Michaela. So cool. Yeah, right. It's Uni Mutual. Kerry, nice work. Nice to see you all. So just simple stuff like that. That's for a smaller format. That was 20 to 40 people. And then they did breakout rooms, which we haven't decided to do today. But the breakout rooms, every single one had a chair. And they did music. So it's literally like a breakout room anywhere else where it's like, go work in your groups now. Here's your tool. Go discuss this topic. And they said you've got 5 minutes, which really meant you had 4 minutes plus 1. And they would go ding dong, and time to change speaker. And it literally came up as the super in the breakout on Teams. Time to change speaker, move to your second speaker if you haven't already. Time to move to your third speaker if you haven't already. Come on, everybody, 1 minute to go. And then everyone doesn't know what to do at the beginning of the 1 minute because they're done. And then they start talking to each other. And then you get the, in 10 seconds, we're taking you back to the main meeting room, and you all unceremoniously, like coming out the bottom of a water slide, get dumped back into the main room. And the energy that created with the facilitator and the timing and the ding dongs and the very, replicated in-person experience they're great. They're really good. And everyone just falls back into the behavioural norms that are expected in that environment. So that was cute, and it was engaging, and it meant that we applied the knowledge, and it meant that everyone got to, play a part in the learning and applying the learning and talking to each other about it. And you got to meet people. So, I met 12 new entrepreneurs, some of whom are financial planners, others of whom are coaches, some of whom are running manufacturing businesses all over the world. So I think the other thing is that geography's gone away. So as long as we can get time zones right, which I have to tell you, people in North America are really bad at doing. Oh, we're running something at 11 p.m. I'm like, yeah. So one thing for those of us here who have audiences that we might want to talk to offshore is we really should be thinking about doing that as well. Geography is just not a thing. Time zone is a thing.
So I went to a conference, the B2B marketing leaders, and that was run on the platform on 24. And we, as participants, had to click in and out. But are you saying on Teams that it automatically puts you into the next thing or out of your breakout and back into the main session?
No, it's all moderated. So a bit like when we did the Chief Investment Officer Roundtable, and Christina Farrelly and our team moderated that very, very directly and had she's got the Zoom equivalent of a tech desk. So she literally, if we were doing it right here and now with the folk we've got here, we'd actually be going, right, Bronwyn from ASPA, we're going to call on you next. And then and Christina as tech desk I loved it because Christina's young and female, and often it's the AV guy. So I really liked the fact that it was Christina Farrelly from BlueChip, who's a young woman who was actually tech desk for the super funds chief investment officers. But, you know, Christina would now unmute Bronwyn because she had moderator controls. The moderator, who was Narelle Hooper, would call on Bronwyn to speak. Bronwyn, you can see where I'm going with this. You're going to have to speak soon. But so it's literally like being in a room with a moderator up the front and AD turning you off and on.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that, you know, that works pretty well.
Yes.
I'm conscious of time. Do you want to lob one more best practice or one more idea in? And then I'm going to ask those of you who can, I understand if you're all parallel processing and not really watching, but those of you who can, I'm going to ask you to unmute and just share one challenge and one success. So Dan, do you want to throw another idea?
Yes, I think the last one is around sales, because typically why we do conferences and whatnot is it's very much linked to the sales goals of the organisation. So one advantage obviously is virtual, is that there's rich data to be harvested on the prospects and clients that were in the sessions, and feeding that through to the sales and distribution team to be able to say Danielle turned up at this and this session and she, you know, asked lots of questions, and being able to funnel that through to sales is a really easy next step for the sales team to then be able to connect with, say, Danielle and say, hey, I saw you had some questions on this, or would you like to talk further, or can I arrange a one-on-one or whatever else? So using not just on the day, but the follow-up really carefully and intentionally.
And what occurs to me listening to you is, if you're a super fund, you wouldn't really think about it as sales. You think about it as a member, and you might think about it as part of your acquisition.
Yeah.
But if you've had a Zoom seminar, fund manager, super fund, insurer, maybe for advisors, and it's educational, but obviously they're people you want in your funnel or you want in your prospective member pool, then everything's recorded. I actually don't know if we're recording this, which is a bit of an epic fail on my part. All right. But I realise now that instead of having to do handoff, the person who's going to do the next thing can go listen to what that person said, which is a very different experience. And one of the things that we've been able to do with some of our recent work is, instead of having to brief team members, it's like, go watch the video. And I've done the same thing. Actually, I wrote an article for one of the clients who's online recently, and instead of me getting briefed by the team in detail, I actually just went and watched the video recording of the entire briefing meeting and was able to pretty much write the article as I watched the briefing. So that richness is most unusual in our previous world.
Yes, when it was all offline. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I reckon we should hear from, it's very Australian, isn't it? We should hear from everyone else. So those of you I'm only going to call on the people who've changed their name, because I assume they're the only people listening. And Michaela, I'm sorry to say to you that you are up on the top right-hand of my screen. Over to you. Success or challenge?
Well, I suppose I was in a situation where I've done events before and hadn't done any virtual events. So we did our first seminar, I think it was about a month ago. So it was for me learning the technology and sort of, understanding how that all works. We did have great success. I mean, we had, I think from memory, it was over 500 people register, and we had about 50% of those turn up on the day. We had some learnings from it, but we had the survey that you can do straight after was really good, because we had great engagement from people and found out that we had more people that probably attended a webinar who had never attended our seminars previously. So it's, for us, it was just a whole new world, and it sort of opened us up to reaching members that we hadn't got close to before. So while we're still planning on doing in the future the face-to-face contacts, I think some of that's always going to be important. We are working on how to incorporate having the virtual events to complement it, so they can work side by side. So it was a success, but big learnings, so, which was good.
Yeah, I mean, it's also new for everyone. And Michaela, what you've just said is so consistent with so many other funds, but how exciting that you reached 500 people and that half of them turned up at a time like this. For funds, I think it's been a game changer. I've heard that story. I've just heard from you from like 4 other funds. It's like attendance is up. And my goodness, at a time like this, you're showing up. It gives you a new way to show up for members. And the benefit of having an in-person experience also, I think, can't be underrated. So thank you very much for sharing.
That's okay.
Can I actually just make a comment there too, because it was really interesting, Michaela. I think there's two things that came to mind for me. One is we are more virtual now, but we will move to a hybrid, I think, pretty soon, possibly, in about 4, 5, 6 months' time, or whenever lockdown's completely lifted. But we've had changes in people's behaviours. So you used to think, the oldies aren't online. Well, they are now. Everybody is. Everybody has learnt new skills, and the hybrid of being able to still go and see people, but for those who don't want to, they're just too far away and too remote, they will be online now, and being able to offer them a recording or a purpose-built virtual event is something that probably we wouldn't even have thought of, or people would have engaged with even 3 months ago. But that's a thing for sure. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. Kerry at Uni Mutual, a success and a challenge?
Okay, so we've been running more webinars recently. We used to only run, say, 3 or 4 a year, and we've been running one a month. And I think our success now is we're getting a much larger audience attending. But the problem that we're having is they're not asking questions at the end. And I don't know how to drive that, encourage that, just that communicating with everyone at the end. I mean, we know that they've got questions, because sometimes they'll come outside of the webinar, but how do we drive that? I mean, normally in our conference environment, we can have polls and things like that, and they're successful, but we find, I just don't know how to approach that in this virtual world.
You do good polls at your conference. The one that I attended last year, which now makes me sad because it was in Byron, the polling was quite good. So you can do polling in this environment, but the other thing that you might want to think about, and I was just having this conversation with someone who's running a discussion group in New South Wales soon, is the benefit of having those smaller groups and giving them a formal agenda to work through. So actually giving them a way to apply or engage with the content, like actually ask the questions. So I think if you set up breakouts and then you ask them to come back with feedback and or questions, it might work. And the other thing is just doing what I'm doing here, which is naming and shaming, I guess. Dan, any other thoughts?
No, I think you're demonstrating how you get people to ask questions and participate. You just name them. There's no hiding. Depends obviously on the size. With 500 people, clearly that's not a thing.
Yeah.
But in a smaller group.
One of the strategic coach things I did, I swear they had a lot of people, like I'm looking at you on my iPad, I can see 9 of you. For on laptop, I'd be able to see more of you, but I had like 4 screens of people, and Dan Sullivan, who runs that program, had no hesitation doing exactly what he does in the room, which is calling people out in a warm and friendly and supportive way. Thank you, Kerry. Philippa, I'm going to skip over you because we have heard from Michaela, and I'm going to go to Bronwyn. Success and a challenge, Bronwyn.
Hi everyone, Bronwyn from ASFA here. I'm in our marketing team, so I'm not as close to the events, and I'm kind of here for personal knowledge, I guess, today, and research. We've had good success with our online events. I think it was Michaela was saying that wider reach. So not just being a Sydney event or a Melbourne event, it's enabled us to get more people online. What has been really good, I think, is the way speakers have been willing to embrace a Zoom or whatever software we've used, and the general public being happy with a lower production value so that we can get content out to them. So we've done a webcast as well, and that's been really helpful, just being able to get it done and recorded and tidied up a bit, but being able to engage with people a bit more quickly.
I think that's a really good point. And thinking about Forrester, they actually had Sheryl Crow perform live on their virtual event. So we're only holding ourselves back, really, in terms of imagination and the way it used to be done. It's all possible now.
Bronwyn, the other thing occurs to me is you're doing interviews and they're video. So that's not, you might not call it an in-person event, but that's a different way to use content, and that's a way more engaging format to deliver a message or shine a light on your own audience.
Yeah, so we've done, we're calling it the webcast series. So it's specifically relating to stuff that's going on through the pandemic. And Martin's interviewing a different person each week from our membership base or an expert in the industry, just to look at the current issues. It is a member-only benefit, but it has been successful.
Yeah, and we're thinking, I keep talking about doing the same thing for BlueChip and not doing it because I know that each one of you have got fascinating stories that would be great to share with others. So I think I think I wanted to call that out because I think it's actually a really good tool that you've got. Nicole, I'm sorry, I'm going to flick over you and Christine because we have heard from your colleagues, but I will come back if I can. I think I'm up to Mandy. One success, one challenge.
Sorry, just struggling to find that mute button. I think for us, we have expanded the style of the delivery, the style of the content. So rather than it being that, you know, instructional straight up webinar, we've now introduced some more interactive things, and that's certainly been well received and a success. I think like everyone else, our challenge has been just adjusting to the technical, you know, presenting to a screen rather than presenting to people and having that immediate feedback on where your content is going and how it's being received. But I have to say that our presenters are highly skilled and have adjusted to that quite quickly. So that challenge has certainly been overcome.
Mandy, can you just tell us too, for those who don't know, who your audience is and what your presenters are talking about? Because you're a bit different to a lot of other folk here, and I think it's worth people understanding that context. So what you've just said sort of, you know, makes sense.
Yeah, so we have traditionally run a quarterly webinar series, and most of our attendees are, you know, financial advisors or accountants. We've moved towards we're calling it an SMSF clinic, where we are actually predominantly dealing with accountants, but allowing them to ask us specific questions prior to the event, where our technical experts will jump in and provide them with, you know, real life examples. And we also had some COVID specific webinars that we threw out to clients. We got amazing response to those and really, really good attendance numbers. And I mean, we generally find our attendance is around the 70 to 80% of our registrants. So our numbers are actually looking quite good.
Yeah, they are.
So yeah. I mean, obviously we've adopted the technology internally quite a bit, and again, our staff have just taken to it like ducks to water. It's really been amazing.
They're professional presenters, so much of what they do is actually teaching and educating people because you're in SMSF. So technical is a huge part of what you do. So I get that. But the other thing I've heard that I want to call out, in case anyone missed it, was actually that you're asking for questions beforehand. So if we were going to write a list of things after this, that's one of the things I would probably put on it, because of course, if we're submitting questions prior and we know they're going to get answered, you're crowdsourcing your content, and it's actually probably a good part of, like Dan talked about, the 3 parts of what you can do to get engagement: pre, during and post. Then that's actually not a bad technique.
And we've seen Ray Dalio do that. So Ray Dalio, world's most famous fund manager, is now on LinkedIn doing LinkedIn Lives. So you have a week to submit questions, and then Ray gets on live and answers questions, and he's all over YouTube as well.
I don't know how many tens of people are running his personal profile on social media, but it is rock star. So if you haven't seen it, everybody, Ray Dalio, D-A-L-I-O, one of the world's most famous fund managers, author of Principles. Their marketing on LinkedIn is pretty amazing. And if your CEO still thinks that he or she shouldn't be available in social media, maybe just say if it's good enough for Ray, particularly if you're working in funds management, just saying. There's a little bit of me being a bit snarky, because sometimes a lot of what we face is folk, I don't need to do any of that stuff. I can see that James and Lucy, James from PM Capital and Lucy are the next 2 folk we should hear from. James, you just renamed yourself, so I'm going to go to Lucy first and then come to you. Conscious of time, I'll keep moving this pretty fast. Lucy, there's a lot good that you were doing before this, right?
Yeah, so we did webinars about 3 or 4 times a year. We've increased that exponentially since the lockdown. We are doing, I think, webinars very well. I'm using it at the moment. We also don't have a writer at the moment, so I'm using it. I'm getting the transcription, and I'm actually turning that into written content for afterwards. So that's working really well. Obviously that's not an event specific thing. Questions, we are doing the submit questions beforehand, and our host is starting off the Q&A, which I think sometimes helps people feel a bit more comfortable about asking a question because they have. So webinars we're doing well. What I think our challenge is we're moving now into some smaller format events with our global, like our offshore fund manager. So they're not obviously going to do a visit this year. They're based in the US. So we had our first one this morning actually, and our challenge is that engagement piece. When they're in a small group, they're reluctant to turn their cameras on, look at all of us with our cameras off, and they're not asking questions. So I think we need to do a bit of work on how we can start that conversation. Calling on people is probably going to be one of my tips. Maybe even using the chat function first to start that conversation, and then I guess then say, oh, well, you know, Lucy, you had a comment. Do you want to elaborate on that? I'm not sure. I'll have a chat with the guys, and equipping our teams to host those more intimate type sessions. So that's us.
And you find probably there'll be sort of early adopters who are happy to do that. Some people would probably rather chew off their own leg than participate in a forum like that. So, but your sales guys, your distribution team will know who's a chattier, more outgoing person. Start with them to, as I say, to sort of, you know, get the session going.
Yeah. Yep.
Thanks, Lucy. I've just seen James's message, which is really good. If you haven't gone to the chat, it's really interesting. James says he's got no mic. Sorry about that, James. And he said we had a 400-person Zoom and it was very successful. That is really big. I would have probably had a minor anxiety attack before that. My challenge was doing it by myself without external support live. Did my head in. Right. So, lots to go wrong. My question is, therefore, how to de-risk the tech when DIY? Well, I would say to you, and everyone else will have other answers, but we practice. So the high stakes event that we did recently with primarily industry fund chief investment officers, man, you can't do this for the 400-person Zoom, but we ran test events without telling them we were running test events. So we said, we're going to do a speaker briefing, and everyone had to join. And then we looked at them all and we made some assessments about whether or not that was going to work. So that was the participants, getting them to do a briefing during which we were actually assessing their performance. So it was like a test event. The Olympics had them. I thought it was plenty good enough to do for the CIO one. I get your struggle about external support. Look, we were good at this before this, but we've had to teach ourselves a lot, and I hear the same thing from everyone here. So I think there's doing it. Like, I actually don't know that there's a shortcut. There are also some really good resources. And we did one, but that's more about how to show up. It's not about the tech. I'm pretty sure that Farrelly in our team, Christina Farrelly and others, have actually just done the old advanced Google. So I think the test event is probably the only surefire de-risker that I'm aware of. And probably back on the presenters.
And also, I don't take too much responsibility for yourself. It's too hard to be a lot of roles, to be the MC and the tech desk and monitoring the chat if that goes off. It is, even if those people aren't normally involved, to have somebody responsible for less things is going to take the stress out of it. So definitely agree with Carden. It's rehearsal and debugging prior, and then it's not trying to have one person responsible for too much.
Okay, if everyone's okay, I'm going to keep going through everyone else, because I think we can continue to deliver our content, but we'll do it by hearing what you've got to say. So Nikki Cable, you are the next person on my screen, and there are also a number of blue chippers on here, but I will probably go to Nathan and come back to the blue chippers if we've got time at the end. So Nikki, over to you.
Hi, thanks, Carden. Or Carden, have I said that correctly? Sorry.
Like Garden.
Like Garden, fantastic, thank you. I'm from NMG Consulting, so we do strategy work with wealth and asset managers in Australia. So there's quite a few business names here that I recognise. We haven't run our virtual event yet, but it is coming. So our success, I suppose, is going to be the opportunity to roll out an event that's pretty big in Australia to our global network. That's something that we're really looking forward to. It's something we probably couldn't have looked at doing financially for a while, but now that we've got the virtual platform, we can definitely look at doing that sooner. The challenge that I wanted to put out there is about handling visuals in an online event. Obviously, being a consultant, love a good PowerPoint slide. In a stadium style event or a webinar event, we would have a blend of detailed charts to show people, and then also just some simple visuals to help people see the structure of our presentation and to make that easy to follow. And so my question is, if I had a giant picture of, say, a mandarin in a presentation on stage, it kind of feels like it makes sense. You're looking at me walking up and down talking. I've put that in some context, and it's just helping you to see where I'm going to go and give you some context what I'm talking about. Does the same thing work when you're staring at your laptop screen? Or do we need to think about visuals like that differently in this context?
Dan, you've dealt with that because you've actually used slides. I hate screen sharing because I'm really crap at it. Nikki said, to be honest, I'm just going to bow out of that answer because I just don't like it. And it's because one of the first webinars we did, for those of you who might have joined that webinar, I'm like the media spokesperson who has a bad first experience. So the very first time I screen shared on a webinar, my entire inbox became apparent to the universe for a nanosecond. Yeah. And I nearly had a coronary and pulled the internet cable out of the wall. Like, I didn't quite, but it was a moment of sheer terror. And fortunately, it was literally a nanosecond. But so, I'm not the person who's allowed to screen share at BlueChip. So Dan?
Again, depending on the platform, you can have both your face and a visual, and both so you can share the PowerPoint presentation if that's the thing, but still see you. And I think if it's a shot of an orange, a full screen share of an orange is probably not going to be as impactful as the stadium setup you've described. People are also using just their backgrounds. You know how you can get the virtual backgrounds. So it might be something that you want to look at to use that.
That's a really interesting idea.
They are a little, they're not perfect. You do see the pixelation, particularly if you're quite a dynamic move about physical speaker. They do go a bit crazy. And we did have a problem with them where a client used the virtual background because media are obviously doing all this, but they're not sending out camera crews and whatnot. And the client had the virtual background with a brand logo on it, which was fantastic, but it just didn't come across very well. It was just quite distracting, ended up a bit too pixelated and low quality when it was on screen. So you have to kind of test that.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
Someone's typing like crazy and not on mute, so that is a little distracting. I'm not sure who's doing that. And then I'm going to go, thank you, Gigi, by the way, for your comment. Gigi Shaw from BlueChip capably points out that the epic fail that Carden had was because I shared, this was quite a while ago, and we weren't using Zoom. I shared my whole screen instead of just the program, which is what you can do. You can actually set your settings up in Zoom to do that. James, I'm not aware of anyone who does Zoom support specifically, but if you've got particular questions, I've talked to Gigi or Christina in our team. They've done more of this than a lot of us, and so actually have Dan. So by all means ask them. What we did for our client last time we ran one that was a media event, and so very high stakes, was we moderated the whole thing. Like, we literally ran it like AV Desk with additional controls that you don't have in a webinar like this. Thanks, Gigi. Nathan from Christian Super, I'd love to know from you what your successes and fails have been on this. Oh my God, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's ringing and I can't make it stop.
Not a problem.
Nice to see you.
Yeah. Hi. And I'm using a virtual background. See, it looks terrible when you wait.
It looks real, actually, until you move. It actually looks plausible.
Yeah. It's been something we've been testing a bit in our teams as we're engaging with our stakeholders. And we've had a few different successes. One thing I've been really encouraging my team is to test and learn. And some of them have been doing some fantastic things. Even hearing Nikki's point, one of my team is really good at, he can have his presentation up with him superimposed over the top of his presentation, and that seems to work. But I guess on some of those points, the virtual nature, one thing we've leaned into is you can now get speakers from anywhere in the world to be a part of your event at a much lower cost than you used to be able to. And that's been a fantastic element that we've been able to have. We've had speakers from the Baltic talking to some of our stakeholders about gender equality and all these other things that we never would have thought of before this time. And another area on engagement with the participants, probably two things. One thing we always tend to do is at the very start, ask people to write in the chat where they're from. And that actually gets people using the functionality and understanding it right from the get-go. That way, when we do come to Q&A at the end of the session, they actually have familiarity with the functionality and are more engaged with how that works. And the other one, particularly with smaller groups, is which someone's mentioned already, is making use of the breakout sessions. It's fantastic how Zoom have that, and it's so easy to use for those who are not technology savvy, don't feel technologically savvy. It adds an extra button to the bottom where you'd normally have your chat and your Q&A, which has breakouts, and you can automatically assign, sorry about the background noise, you can automatically assign a number of people to a number of rooms, and then they all go into those rooms, discuss the question, then you click a close all breakout rooms, and it gives them a 60-second warning, and it closes them all down, and they all join back the main meeting. It works really well for that sort of engagement. We're still learning how to, what are the best ways to do this, particularly presentations where you are doing slides. It can be a little hard to judge the sort of engagement you're having and respond to it, whereas when you're in a room, you can see that people are looking disengaged, they speed things up or get a bit more excitable. It's a lot harder to do that virtually. Don't know the answers to those questions, but it's something we just continue to test and learn.
What I've seen work quite well on the engagement, sorry, just really quickly, work really well on the engagement is to have sort of every 15, 20, 30 minutes to run a poll and then show the results on screen. So everybody has to submit in their answers. Then of course they're interested to know, am I thinking what everybody else is thinking? That's actually worked quite well. And thank you for the tip on the Zoom breakout session. That's good to know.
I'm conscious of time. We've got 8 minutes left. We haven't yet heard from Andy at Petshaw. And for those of you who don't know, Petshaw is the largest pet insurer in Australia. So they have they serve folk, they're a pet insurance manufacturer, and they provide pet insurance through a number of household brands, Bupa, Woolworths. They've also got a premium brand called Trupanion. If you don't have pet insurance, I would say to you, that is a really smart thing. I'm the daughter of country vet surgeons, so I love working with Petshaw because they have I think quite an extraordinary product. Andy, I'd love to know how you have used this, what your successes and your failures are, because you've got a really different kind of audience to the one that a lot of folk here are talking about. Actually, probably similar to the super funds, because you're talking to Australian households, but you've got a category that involves cute animal photos. So I suspect you've got some assets the rest of us don't have.
I do indeed. And coming from the likes of CommBank, which don't get me wrong, I love it, but cats and dogs are much cuter than credit cards. So love the category. So we've recently launched our Pause and Learn webinar series with topics for pet parents and then a separate stream for vets. So I guess as a pet insurance administrator working with so many brands, as you said, the approach for us is to take a bit more of a leadership position, and our brand purpose is for life with pets. So that means, yes, we're covering pet insurance topics, but we're actually covering a range of topics that we know are of interest to pet parents at the moment. Great example was last night's webinar, helping pets avoid separation anxiety, which was our most successful by far to date. We had 600 people registered, 200 live, and countless of requires for recording. So that's tip number one. Always make sure you record the webinar, because not only does it give you an additional opportunity for reach and brand awareness, but it gives you additional content opportunities that you yourself can use Or if you're similar like us, you can supply to your partners for them to leverage as well to get that additional reach. Another great tip that's been invaluable for us is to have a post-webinar survey. So we use GoToWebinar platform, which is great, has its limitations as well, which I'll get to in a moment. But what I do like is that you can create a post-webinar survey, and ours is sent right after the webinar and then also the following day, which gives people a chance to comment. We keep it nice and short. It's only 5 questions. Number 1's quality. Number 2 is, God, now put on the spot, I'm brain dead from last night. Quality, advocacy, so would you recommend the series? Brand awareness, because for us as the administrator, we know that customers may not know who Petra are, so it's kind of just a nice, easy bench point with a captured audience, which is great. And then we also ask for future topics for other webinars, so people can feel engaged, as well as kind of any other general feedback. And that helps to capture any technical issues that people might have had, or just general kind of comments on the speaker content and presentation. Some learnings, there have been many. This is our first webinar series and my first personal webinar involvement. We are a tiny team. For the most part, it is just me. So I'm doing everything from the copy and graphic design to the program management and so forth. So if there's other people experiencing similar capacity challenges, I'm with you and I'm happy to help with other questions. One of the biggest things I can advise is have a plan B. We had one speaker that caused a huge amount of anxiety in terms of basically became uncontactable. We weren't sure if they were even going to turn up. And this was for one of our higher registration webinars. So it was a bit anxious inducing. So basically what we did, it was good news in the end, they turned up and it was fine. But what that made us do is that we had a range of pre-approved assets ready to go should we have to cancel the event in the last minute. So i.e. an EDM to all registered parties, kind of, giving apologies and and telling them, we'll let them know when it'll be rescheduled. And also like social assets. So just kind of almost having a bit of a kit ready should you need to cancel last minute would be a great one. And yeah, probably just the last one, just from a platform perspective, because I myself was quite familiar with Zoom and Skype. However, our co-presenter, our chief vet, had used GoToWebinar in the past, so that's what we ended up using. The pros, amazing reporting, the stats you can get in terms of attentive levels, who clicked on registrations, who attended live, the ability to do polls and surveys and all that, amazing. What I feel a limitation is, and it did cause us to have to pivot quite quickly to a different way to promote the series, is that GoToWebinar works with an individual registration link for each person. So what that means, rather than how Zoom and Skype, you can create a single event registration link that anyone can click through to. This one basically will have a registration link, but then each individual will have to register, and that will produce an individual event invite for them. So that's obviously great from the reporting side of things, but where that kind of makes it more challenging is we originally had a plan where we were basically through our EDMs advertising the series, we were going to have like the one registration link that was really nice and clean, and we had a retargeting strategy of that, which was really nice and clean. But because each individual person has their own calendar invite as such, that kind of made us pivot last minute. But it is all good, not without challenges.
Thank you, Andy. We have 2 minutes to go. That is really helpful and really very different to what I suspect a lot of the rest of us have seen. So picking up on your points, and Lucy mentioned this earlier, Lucy from IML mentioned this, the multiple formats is really important. The plan B is actually a really good point, and I realise now that we've been taking some risks by not having a plan B. So what I will do, if everyone's okay with it, drop me a note if you don't want us to transcribe this and publish it, but we might actually do that, and then you can all get that. If we have time, we might actually try to pick some of this out as well, and do a short article on literally just a list of strategies. But I think for me, one of the really good things about this is Dan came with prepared content, but this is so good hearing from all of you. So thank you all very, very much for participating, for sharing your own successes and challenges with everyone else on the line. We're going to do exactly what you just said, Andy, which is I've written down your survey and I'm going to go and look at how we've done surveys before, and we'll get one out to you all using your exact format, I think, because this is not revenue earning for us at all, but we do want to keep doing this. One of the things we decided was to make a contribution to the industry by just sharing our own IP and helping clients learn faster together. So that's part of what today is about. Dan, any closing comments? We are at 100, and before 101, I'm going to let everyone go.
No, it's been fantastic, and I really appreciate hearing what's going on in the trenches, because we only obviously see so much, and I certainly got a lot out of hearing what other people are doing, and just the practical tips that you're experiencing, whether it's platform glitches or roles that you've got to play. So thank you very much for being put on the spot and participating and sharing your knowledge. I think it's
and I just want to say, Dan, this hurt less than you thought it would, Dan.
Yeah, it did, because everybody else got to speak rather than me. It's perfect. Love this.
I know. Thank you everyone for joining and for participating so well. We'll drop you a follow-up survey. Please be frank. We'd like your feedback. We want to make these as good as we possibly can. Have a great Thursday afternoon and good weekend, everybody. We will be back with more. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thanks all. Thanks, Carden. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.